Welcome back, Honors. All right, so let's go ahead and start this flip off with one thing that we need to make sure that I understand, that you understand, that we all understand, is the idea that even at the very beginning of this unit, some of you are already confused, right? So I had a couple of y'all come up to me after class, you were like, I don't really know what's going on, okay? And what we're going to do tomorrow in class is kind of finish that little stuff about the monsoon marketplace, right? Finish that stuff about the regions of the world, the Arab kingdoms, the African kingdoms, the Asiatic kingdoms, and their golden age that was occurring during this time period, okay? Now, the time period that we are, of course, discussing is the years of about 500 AD to about 1400 AD, give or take, so about 900 years worth of time, right? And some of you are like, Mr. Terry, we took forever to go through maybe 1,000 years worth of time about the Greeks and the Romans. Well, a lot of it is because we have that kind of time that they left behind records so we can actually study them as a historic people. This unit's a little bit weird. We're dealing a lot with what we may or may not know for sure due to the fact that there wasn't a ton of historiography and or writings about this time period actually being documented outside of the Eastern Golden Age anyway. All right, so now I just want you to go ahead and do me a favor and put this next thing in your notes, and we're going to be talking about the Byzantine, right? So when you look at your notes, okay, you had the Middle Ages, right? And you had two things we had to talk about before we got into the Middle Ages in Western Europe, right? We had the Eastern Golden Age, right, which we just talked about in class a little bit. We got a little bit to finish up, right? And then you've also got the Byzantine, right? So this section we're now going to be discussing is the Byzantine Empire, right? So do me a favor, write down the Byzantine Empire. We're now going to discuss what that is, where it is, and why it's so important. Okay, so look, the Byzantine Empire, before we go any further, before we get ahead of ourselves, before kids start freaking out and being like, Terry, I'm going to fail. All right, well, calm down. The Byzantine Empire is just a fancy word for Eastern Rome, right? As we discussed in the quiz that you just took, Theodosius comes in, he splits the empire in half, right? And there's an Eastern Rome and a Western Rome, right? You got Western Rome here, Eastern Rome here. Western Rome falls in 476 AD to barbarian migrations, barbarian movement, and just general instability, inflation, price escalation, a lot of different things like that, and it crumbles and falls to the ground, leaving behind no one to rule and an issue that happens a lot in history known as a power vacuum, right? Whereas most of the people that did live here that had the intelligence, that understood how to read and write Latin, that could actually develop themselves, moved into the eastern part of the empire, right? Now, if you were to ask, jot this down, if you asked somebody in the Byzantine Empire, hey buddy, where are you from? Where are you from? They would say, oh, I'm from Rome. They still called this Rome, okay? They still referred to it as Rome during the time period. But this is where your brains are going to break a little bit. Some of you are either going to really get it, and it's going to be a light bulb moment, or some of y'all are going to be like, I'm still so confused, okay? And that's okay if you are. Just write down questions in your notes, and we'll discuss them, okay? Now, big thing, though, is that the Easterners called themselves Romans still because they didn't know any better. Of course they thought they were Rome because what was this? If you don't just cover this up, you're still Eastern Rome, right? The reason why in the modern era we call it the Byzantine is because Renaissance thinkers from the 1400s in Italy called it the Byzantine Empire. They called it the Byzantine Empire because they were like, oh, well, because we're having a Renaissance and Rome fell. This isn't Rome, right? So this is a big dispute, okay? And this will make a lot of sense when you come into class tomorrow and we kind of take a step back and we look at the map and we circle key areas where we're like, okay, so we got the years of 500 to 1400 AD. Here's what's happening in these different regions. You understand what I'm saying, okay? So if you asked anybody that lived over here, where are you from? They'd say Rome. They didn't call it the Byzantine Empire. We call it the Byzantine Empire because of Renaissance thinkers calling it the Byzantine Empire after Constantine showed up and he wants to create this new Rome, right? He wants to create this place called New Rome, and he creates it in the eastern half of the Roman Empire, right? And where he did this he rebuilt a old Roman city, okay? So this is all because of Constantine, right? I want to put myself right here between them. All right, so Constantine is the reason why the Byzantine Empire was able to progress forward, right? So Constantine shows up after Diocletian, splits it into his tetrarchy, which are his 4 parts, right? He shows up, he takes over the whole thing, establishes 2 new capitals, right? You got the old Rome and you got Nova Roma, which actually was built in the old Roman city of Byzantium, right? The Roman city that was originally there that he then renamed Nova Roma was called Byzantium, right? That's why Renaissance thinkers called it the Byzantine Empire, named after Byzantium, right? Eventually, after Constantine's death, though, Byzantium's name will be changed to Nova Roma. It'll then be changed to Constantinople, okay? So as you can tell, this city is a key place, okay? Byzantium, Nova Roma, Constantinople will be its 3rd name. Its modern day name today is Istanbul, okay? Go ahead and jot that down. Its name today is Istanbul, Istanbul, okay? And Istanbul is the largest city in the modern day country of Turkey. So if we're jumping back real quick, right? If we're jumping back to this map, we're talking about a city that exists right here. At this very, very important strait that goes into the Black Sea. It is I think it's the Strait of St. George, right? So the Strait of St. George going through there, right? So the Byzantine Empire really emanates out of its capital city. And the capital city is known as Constantinople, right? It was originally known as Byzantium, then Constantine called it Nova Roma, and then after Constantine died, they referred to it as Constantinople because he was such a great ruler, right? And why is this thing so great? Why is Constantinople and the Byzantine Empire such a big deal? A lot of it has to do with the fact that Constantinople, in and of itself as a capital city, was a massive city, humongous, the biggest that had existed in the Roman Empire after the fall of Rome, right? When the fall of the actual Roman city occurred, the city of Rome occurred, Constantinople was then the biggest Western city in the world, right? So Constantinople is protected on not all sides by water. That's stupid. That would make it an island. It's protected on 3 sides by water. Here's that Strait of St. George that cuts through it, okay? So Constantinople was a huge city. Very, very large, right? So, but early on, it was just kind of another Roman city. Big, mostly built out of brick, like kind of had some decent infrastructure. But the big thing is that Christianity was also its official religion, right? So Christianity becomes the official religion of that city, and they build up a very strong military. They build huge walls to protect the city because they're very aware in Constantinople that Western Rome is falling, right? So they're like, we have to do whatever we can to keep the eastern side alive because ever since Theodosius went and split it into 2 parts, now Constantinople is worrying about the East, right? Which also in the long run is kind of a very karmic event because Constantinople, the former city of Byzantium, is also where Mark Antony ruled from when he then started hooking up with Cleopatra, to give you some kind of karmic understanding, whereas Augustus's side of the empire would eventually fall before Mark Antony's would. I really still think to this day that Mark Antony would have been a better leader. But anyway, I know Colleen agrees with that as well. So strong military, okay? They built huge walls to protect the city. Also, here's the big kicker, okay? When we talk about progress, golden ages, periods of prosperity, Renaissance, anything positive that occurred in history, most of it has to do with a good economy, okay? When a good economy exists inside of a civilization, they are then more prosperous. Technology booms, things advance, right? Art, science, social status, all of those things go forward when your economy is booming. And the economy of Constantinople, especially at its earliest onset in the 500s AD, making it rain left and right, okay? Like very, very solid economy, very good economy because it's a trade hub, right? What I mean by it's a hub is that everything passed through there. Okay, it's right between China and Europe, okay, and traders would have to pass through the Byzantine Empire to get goods to Europe if they were going to be selling them, right? And right here, there you go, here's our map right here, right? So Constantinople, as you can see, is very far to the east. The Strait of St. George provides a huge trade depot going through the Black Sea. And also you've got the Eastern empires over in this general region. So that monsoon marketplace that we were talking about yesterday, that thing that's going on in the Indian Ocean that's making them all that money, Constantinople saw the benefits of that thing. Those goods that were being trafficked in and out could easily be moved into Constantinople and then sold into other parts of Europe to the still remaining wealthy families that existed there, right? Any remnants of the Roman Empire that still existed and had enough money to actually purchase goods, right? So traders had to pass through there to get through Europe. And a lot of it, too, is you got to understand this as well. Jot this this down. It is one of the major depots on this thing, the Silk Road. All right, so have you ever heard of the Silk Road before? If you haven't heard of the Silk Road before, you should have heard of the Silk Road before, right? This is like some 4th grade level, very important stuff. The Silk Road is a massive trade route that literally spanned from China all the way to Italy, okay? So what was left of the Roman Empire in like Italy and in like the Byzantine, but especially in the Byzantine because it was so large, saw the goods from this road, this monsoon marketplace, this gigantic trade network passing through their territory. So Constantinople had all kinds of different goods in it, right? Let's jot these goods down. What are some goods that you could find in Constantinople that you couldn't find anywhere else because of the Silk Road, right? Constantinople was home to spices, silks, ceramics, right? Ceramics, right? Ceramics, which is types of porcelain, Chinese pots and pottery and things like that. They also saw military weapons. They saw large trade vessels, boats, naval fleets, all these different products pass. Oh, and a big one that apparently was one of the biggest sellers early on, tea. Tea from China, tea. Tea became a very hot market item that Constantinople had a buttload of because it was all coming from China on that Silk Road, right? So as you can see, the Silk Road is absolutely massive. And if all of those goods are passing through the Byzantine Empire, it's going to make the Byzantine Empire very, very wealthy. And the Byzantine Empire existed from 500 AD to 1453 AD, right? So like, as you can tell, the Byzantine is so big. And some of you are like, well, Mr. Terry, why are we talking about the Middle Ages then? Like I said, again, don't worry about it so much. We will discuss all that stuff tomorrow. We will discuss all that when we actually get a chance to step back, look at the map and be like, okay, Middle Ages, Byzantine, monsoon marketplace, right? So now look, the guy that is going to do the best amount of progress, though, in the Byzantine Empire is this guy right here, a man by the name of Justinian, right? So following the rulership of Constantine, there were several different leaders within the Byzantine Empire, right? Many of them very, very good, okay? Constantine was phenomenal. There was a second Augustus that ruled from there as well. A lot of very solid leaders, but none of them were quite as good for the Byzantine themselves as Justinian was, right? Justinian brought the Byzantine Empire to its peak, okay? And he is going to rule from 526 AD to 565 AD, right? He is going to rebuild Constantinople in grand style, much like Augustus did to Rome. There's an old quote that says, Augustus found Rome a city of brick and left it a city of marble, right? That he rebuilt it in grandiose style. That is what Justinian's going to do to Constantinople, right? He is going to rebuild the city with massive pieces of architecture, gorgeous churches, all kinds, and this is the biggest one, right? To give you an understanding of the largeness, the beautifulness, the amazing, who the heck is that? I don't know who that's some lady. All right, so let's go ahead and, the Hagia Sophia. There we go. Sorry, I did the soft J, my bad. This is what I was looking for. Right there, the Hagia Sophia, right? The Hagia Sophia, or like the Hagia Sophia is often referred to, is right here. This is the example of how well rebuilt, beautiful, and amazing Justinian had Constantinople rebuilt. That right there was the largest Christian church ever built up to that point in history, built by Justinian in Constantinople, right? The Hagia Sophia, right? So the Hagia Sophia is absolutely massive, humongous, incorporates Greek style and Roman style architectural themes and blends all of them together, right? Now, big thing though that we need to understand is a lot of people still make pilgrimages to this place. A lot of Christians still go there, right? As a very big thing. It's not Christian church anymore, though. It is now currently a mosque, right? It is actually now a Muslim church, right? And we'll talk about that later on as well, okay? Now, and it's got architectural themes that are absolutely wild. Like if you zoom in and you look, the dome is surrounded by windows. So when the sun is streaming inside of them, and if you're standing beneath the dome inside of the Hagia Sophia and you look up, it looks as if the roof is floating. And the claim was always that a chain came down from heaven and held the roof up for Justinian and for the people of Constantinople, right? So this building, in and of a sense, is just an example of how well built Constantinople was under Justinian while he's ruling from this time period, right? And he is going to rule from 526 AD to 565, and he's going to rebuild that city in grand style. He's going to bring more trade goods, more prosperity. He's going to invent also something that had not been seen before. The Justinian Code, right? The Justinian Code is going to be a better version of the 12 tables law code that existed in the Roman Empire, right? The Romans had the 12 tables, and it was great. It was good. It settled some disputes. It chopped people up apparently into equal debted amounts, right? It was like if somebody's got to get to court, you got to provide an animal. It was a fine law code. It was okay. It wasn't the best, but it was okay. Justinian's going to take it a step further, and he's going to create a civil law code, right? His Justinian code applies to everyone, regardless of class, right? No patrician or plebs anymore. He says that that man and that man and that person are equal before the eyes of this law code, and these laws all apply to them the same, right? So he saw a problem that existed in the Roman Empire, and he fixes it with his Justinian code. And it's not just limited to that. He stopped a civil war that was occurring inside, or a rebellion, a huge rebellion that was occurring inside of the city of Constantinople. Ironically enough, it was about chariot racing teams, right? He also had the hippodrome rebuilt, right? So as we were talking about the Circus Maximus, right, inside of the city of Rome, he had one built in Constantinople known as the hippodrome, right? So, and the hippodrome was actually an old Greek hippodrome. The hippodrome was an old the hippodrome of Constantinople. The hippodrome of Constantinople, which is parts of it are still there, is actually a giant chariot racing ring as well that he had built in Constantinople, right? So, like, it's absolutely massive to understand. Oh, here's the other crazy thing. He successfully led, jot this down, he successfully led Constantinople through a plague, all right? So, like, the plague of Justinian. He even got the disease and didn't die, right? So it's absolutely wild, okay? So Justinian, though, was able to rule with sole authority because he was what you would call an autocrat, right? He is an autocrat. He was a sole ruler that had complete authority. He had advisors and teams of people, but, like, he did not have what you would call, like, the Senate and the government conspiracies that were occurring inside of Rome. But did he have somebody that helped him rule along the way? He actually did. One of the most strong female figures that has ever existed inside of Western civilizations is the wife of Justinian, known as Theodora, right? So everybody loves Theodora. Every girl in my class loves Theodora. This is her right here. Theodora was apparently a ruthless leader that helped her stop that civil rebellion of chariot racing teams. Red team versus blue team. I'm not kidding. It was colors that, like, fought against each other. It would be like if Eagles fans go birds, fought Saints fans, right? So we'd win. But anyway, but the big thing about it, though, is Theodora helped him stop that rebellion. She ruled with him and for him when he got that plague, and she made sure that he lived, right? Theodora is very aggressive. It is said that Theodora had more people sent to their death than Justinian himself because she was very ruthless and very intense, right? And she was his main advisor and his co-ruler. So the right hand of the best ruler of the Byzantine was his wife. How awesome is that, right? So, and apparently they met each other because she was a dancer, all right? So, like, she was a dancer. We'll say dancer, right? Dancer, and that's how they actually ended up meeting each other, right? And Justinian even builds the strongest military that the Byzantine had ever seen. Under Justinian, they had an army equipped with a weapon known as Greek fire, which is actually demonstrated right here, okay? This army, this naval fleet of Constantinople had a weapon that no one else in the world had under Justinian. Greek fire was basically pressurized petroleum. I'm not saying the OIL word because y'all are all going to freak out. And they had this pressurized petroleum inside this big bucket, and they would put air inside of it, and then when they released it, it would spray out over top of a flame and go and set boats on fire inside the harbor, right? Absolutely insane. Here again is the Hagia Sophia, right? And as you can tell, the Byzantine was very powerful, right? They were very, very powerful. They were very, very large, and, like, they were what was left of the Roman Empire, right? And some of you are like, but I thought you said the Middle Ages was bad. We're talking about Western Europe in the Middle Ages. It's the Byzantine right now. And this right here, those are all the lands reclaimed by Justinian during his rule, right? So he's a very, very, very strong leader. And unfortunately, though, it would never be the same, right? Byzantine Empire, because they were so powerful, because they were so intense, because they were so good following the fall of Rome, they also attracted a lot of attention, right? So the Byzantine was starting to be attacked. Following the rule of Justinian around the 570s, they begin to be attacked by Slavs, Persians, Vikings, Huns, and the biggest one out of all of them, which you should underline, the Turks, right? They start getting attacked by all these people because the rest of the world is realizing how strong and wealthy they are, right? And they want to take this city to actually create a city of their own, right? So these different people start raiding and attacking Constantinople. And it affects everything, right? It affects everything. It causes a lot of confusion, a lot of distraction, a lot of intensity. And the biggest thing that a lot of us believe it affected was the Byzantine church, right? So due to this extreme amount of stress that the Byzantine was like falling underneath, due to the attacks from the outside, the movement of trade goods, the reestablishment of lands, and all these other things, what ended up occurring was a massive event known as the Great Schism, right? So before this Great Schism, you have to understand, is that everyone was Catholic, right? Or what you would believe the Catholic Church, okay? And then there started to be a lot of disputes and disagreements about ways to practice that faith, right? And a lot of people were like, well, we shouldn't have a singular leader. We should have like a first amongst equals, right? Instead of a pope. And the Roman Catholics were like, no, that's ridiculous, right? I like in the Bible, it says that the first pope, yada, yada, yada. Then another one was actually about, there's a word that Mr. Mathern knows what it is, and I can't ever remember what it is, but it's about how you say in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Whereas the other side of the church was like, we don't need to recognize one part of it, or they don't say it that way, okay? It's I'll have to ask him what it is. But it's all of these arguments and these disputes. There were arguments over iconography. There were arguments over the way you take the Eucharist, right? There were arguments over these different things, which is going to cause the church to just go and schism, right? It's literally going to split in half, okay? And it's going to lead to the establishment of the Eastern and the Western churches. The Western church becomes the Roman Catholic Church, and the Eastern church, write this down, becomes the Eastern Orthodox Church, right? That split is massive because it has major effects that ripple through Europe even later on. And that, I believe, happened in 1053, okay? I think that happened in 1053. Now, the Crusades, though, are then going to be a huge issue, which I know that Megan LaCour apparently already knew about, which was awesome. Appreciate you. Also, Courtney Stahl, I saw you wrote the Crusades down on your stuff as well. Crusades were a major event that occurred in the Middle Ages, right? And they started around 1090. And those wars left the Byzantine very small and weak because crusading armies from the west had to come through Constantinople to get to the city of Jerusalem, right? Constantinople, though, was going to be completely conquered, though, by the Turks in 1453. Many famous Christian sites still remain there, but the Byzantine was very strong at one point. However, following the rule of Justinian, it does begin to weaken and shrink, right? So many people still go there today. It's one of my big top 10 lists. I definitely want to go to Istanbul at some point, visit the old Constantinople, and I will see you guys later. Y'all have a good one.